Hello, I'm Gemma Fisher, a border collie training and behaviour expert, here to help you bring out the best in your dog. Whether you're tackling reactivity, recall struggles, or just want to understand your collie better, you're in the right place. This podcast is all about making life with your collie easier, with practical advice, hands-on solutions, and a good dose of encouragement every step of the way. And don't forget, if you want even more support, head over to our Facebook group. That's where you'll find my weekly live Q&A session, exclusive training guides, and a community of collie owners just like you. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about something that used to really frustrate me, barking. But not just from a trainer's perspective, from a very personal one. Because the truth is, the way I think about barking now is very different from how I saw it when I first started out. So grab a cuppa, get yourself comfy, and let's get started. So my very first dogs, actually, so the family dogs that I grew up with were two golden retrievers. And truthfully, I don't really remember anything about my parents training them. They were always in the background, and they were a comforting, familiar part of my childhood. But yeah, I don't remember anything in kind of terms of training. Jolly and Raffles came along after that, an English Springer Spaniel and then a Yorkshire Terrier. But again, training-wise, I don't know. I might have done a little bit of training with Raffles, the Yorkshire Terrier, but honestly, again, they were a comforting part of like the everyday of my life, which was just wonderful. But my first training experience was with two terrier crosses, dogs that my dad used to call Bitzer Terriers. Okay, Bitzer is not a breed. It was a dad joke. Bits of this, bits of that, and their names were Lucy and Toby. Lucy was very much the dog that I would have chosen out of the litter. Toby was the dog that my mum chose out of the litter. And the way that they came home, Toby actually was chosen by mum, and he was the one that came home. Lucy was already promised to another family. And so she came back when she was about 16 weeks old. She'd been returned to the rescue where, they'd been raising the puppies. And anyway, the lady in rescue knew me, and she knew that I had liked Lucy very much. So she got in touch and she said, would you be interested in a second puppy? Now, the trainer in me now would probably have said that wasn't a good idea to have, siblings and with all the like challenges of having two puppies of the same age and growing up and things. But, ignorance is bliss, right? So in my 20 something, early sort of late teens, early 20s, when I'm doing the training, there are a lot of judgments and assumptions attached to barking with that version of me. And the barking that I used to get from those two dogs was Toby would be very much demand barking. Like he would get frustrated that he couldn't get to something or that he wanted something. Training wise, I wasn't feeding him the treat that he thought he deserved straight away, all of that sort of stuff. And Lucy was very reactive to other dogs. I remember thinking back in a puppy class where she had just reacted to the other puppies. So she might have been, I don't know, 18 weeks old, something like that at the time. So young, and thinking like, why? None of the dogs that we had grown up with had been reactive. So this was a brand new experience for me. And if I'm completely honest, at that time, even with Lucy reacting and kind of knowing that she was ever such a sweet dog. I mean, she, I was there when we said goodbye. I took her to be put to sleep because of one thing or another. It wasn't possible for my parents to be there, and she was by the end, certainly my feelings had changed quite considerably about barking, and I understood her much better. I understood where she was coming from, and really, she and I. She had always known that she was going to end up living with me. I hadn't, but she did, in the way that dogs do. But my honest thoughts probably at that time were, if I saw a dog barking, it would be, why can't you keep your dog quiet? Like, why can't you keep your dog quiet? And that early class with Lucy really confused me, because I have this kind of standpoint and this kind of quite judgy, why can't you stop your dog barking? And then my dog is starting to do that. And back then, I just didn't know what I didn't know. Looking back, I definitely know that I placed the blame on the dogs instead of thinking about, particularly with Toby. So when Toby used to bark at me, I used to get really frustrated at him back. And I know that I got frustrated because I was like, I've told you what to do and you should be able to do it. And, I was quite, judgy. not thinking about what I might be doing and how my behavior might be reflected in this little dog, who Toby I also adored very much. He was my mum's dog, very much so. But yes, we all adored Toby. He was just a happy-go-lucky. His you have to register them with the UK Kennel Club in order to compete in agility. So we came up with the name Blythe Boy, Blythe meaning happy. And he was just like a happy, cheerful chappy. So when he barked, he was communicating that he just thought, I didn't know what I was doing. And I didn't like that judgment from him on me, if I'm honest. But I can only admit that now, I think, looking back on it. But they weren't the only dogs. So when I thought back over my barking journey, if you like, I thought about Kai and Ella. So they were my first two border collies. So Kai came first, Ella came second. And they came along to my wedding, the marriage to my husband, my children's father, lovely man. Yeah, he was generous enough to say, yeah, of course the dogs can all come to the wedding. So Kai and Ella are at the wedding, Toby and Lucy are at the wedding. I think my sister had Dylan at the time and maybe a couple of terriers. So they're all at the wedding. There's a lot of dogs here at the wedding. And Kai would set off barking every time somebody clapped after one of the speeches. You know how you do speeches at weddings, don't you? So, he's barking his head off. And there's this one video clip, and I watch this video clip relatively frequently because of the fact that my dad is in the clip. It's his speech, and my dad is now passed, so it's a very precious thing. And what's funny is I'm dressed up to the nines. I'm in my wedding dress. I look very serene and lovely. And there I am going, be quiet, Kai. I'm turning and I look quite evil as I'm telling him off for barking. It made no difference at all, mind you. Like he would be quiet once I'd said it, but it wasn't going to stop him barking the next time everybody started clapping. It was what it was. And I look back on that, and what's funny is that barking now, that sound is something I love to hear, in the same way that I love watching it because of my dad doing his speech. So it's interesting, isn't it, how barking can become something that was annoying, and it can turn into something that actually I miss the sound. I miss the sound. What's funny, as I say, if you look at this video, it's really Jekyll and Hyde of me, in so much as there I am, being the bride, and then I turn and I look quite evil. So yeah, not my proudest moment. But and Ella, okay, so Ella used to do quite a bit of barking. So I remember her first agility class, which might have been a foundation agility class. I can't quite remember. Quite a long time ago now, more years than I care to admit. But she used to get really bad FOMO, okay, fear of missing out, which I think might be written into every border collie's DNA. I think that might be part of who they are. But she would, excuse me, she would bark at the other dogs having their turn, whether or not they weren't doing it right, whether or not she just wanted to join in, whatever it was. And so I shifted to one-to-one training because I couldn't be doing. I mean, I stuffed so much cheese into that dog while she was waiting her turn. And even then it wasn't completely working. It certainly helped. But I mean, she was getting through vast amounts of cheese and still, like, it was frustrating. And I wasn't able to watch what other people were doing or listen to the instructor and so on and so forth. So one-to-ones. And one-to-ones obviously were a management thing. It stopped the barking in so much as she wasn't having to wait her turn, but it didn't necessarily fix what was going on. And when I look back, what I realize is that, and I do remember my feelings of frustration, just, because of my judgment that I told you about earlier about, why can't you just keep your dog quiet? And here I am, my dogs are barking their heads off and it's really bothering me. But they weren't bad dogs. Kai and Ella were not bad dogs. In fact, I often say that black and white ones are the best ones. I don't have a black and white one at the moment. Probably my next puppy will have to be black and white because I miss having a black and white border collie around. But they weren't bad dogs. It was just a case of them having really big feelings and not having enough clarity about what I wanted them to do instead. I can absolutely see that now. Kai certainly, loved the sound of his own voice in much the same way his mother does. And yeah, I mean, there were times where he would bark at me when I think back to he had a relatively brief agility career because of a car accident where he ended up on 3 legs. So it was a relatively short stint of agility training. But yeah, there were times that he'd bark at me too, because he was just like, I need to understand what it is that you want me to do, because otherwise they can't get the reinforcement, can they? Because we're holding onto the toy, or we're holding onto the treats. And if we say that's not good enough, but we're saying it's not good enough and we didn't explain it properly, you can understand why they get frustrated quite quickly. So yeah, I can see that actually now the way that I do things in terms of how I explain things to dogs is much clearer. And yeah, I wish I could have a do-over with those dogs. That would be fun. But here's the thing: the way that my dogs have changed is interesting to me. This is really interesting to me, because people will come around, and certainly when I think we moved into our new house a couple of years ago, we arrived with 5 dogs, and there were probably some neighbours that were thinking, we're living next door to the neighbour that has 5 dogs. But these guys are really quiet. Moss, my husband's dog, is probably the noisiest. I shall leave you to your own imagination as to why that might be. Impact, actually, to be fair, Impact can be very barky. When she gets worried, she can get very barky. But as a rule, like when training or when doing bits and pieces, or just like living life around the house, there isn't an excessive amount of barking. It's really quite different to how it was in the early days. And one of the things that's interesting to me is that my mum has just got a new puppy. His name is Bertie, and he's a show cocker spaniel, actually not a border collie, but we'll allow him because he makes my mum very happy. But what's interesting watching him growing up is kind of understanding his language from the beginning much better than I would have done when Toby and Lucy came along and Kai and Ella came along. He kind of has this kind of bulletin style chatter that kind of carries on when he needs somebody to sort of do something for him. And it's really interesting to me how, like, he's never wrong. Like, when he says something, he's never wrong. It's always something that he needed. And some of that is they need to learn, like, you can't always have something straight away and those sorts of things. But actually, if he gets stuck, that's really useful. I need to know that you're stuck so I can come and rescue you, that sort of thing. And then I can hear in my head Vodka's protecting style bark. So the bark that sounds like, if you didn't know Vodka, you'd be quite worried. But if you know Vodka, you know that big, deep, scary sounding bark is not scary at all. That dog would lick you to death, but she would not harm any part of you. But these different sounds of how they are talking to us is important. What's funny actually is that one of my border collies, Summer, she got stuck underneath the garden office that I'm in now, recording this podcast. It's out in our garden, and it's on a concrete base, and we didn't know, but there's a little bit of space underneath, which she had been maybe burrowing out. In retrospect, maybe she was feeling a bit hormonal, maybe post having had a season, maybe phantom pregnancy. I don't know. Certainly, my 2 border collies, Todd and Summer, are very hot dogs. So whether or not she'd found a cool spot, whatever, that's sort of by the by. But she got stuck. She got stuck under the building. And the hole that she was in, when we later found it, she was trying to get out, but then there was, sort of earth and soil coming back on it as she was trying to get out. So quite sensibly, in some ways, she decided that she wasn't going to move. But I'm calling her and I'm panicking because I've counted the wrong number of dogs into the house. The side gate is shut. I'm thinking, has somebody got into the house and stolen my dog? It was weird. Made a lot of sense when we found her in this hole, but it would have been really helpful actually had she barked. But she is not a barker to communicate sort of a dog. She's a very quiet dog. She sometimes talks to her brothers and sisters. Occasionally if she's trying to sleep in the evening, she'll sometimes give a bit of a I'm trying to sleep sort of a noise, but generally speaking quite quiet. So in that instance, Bertie's like little bit of chat it would have been very helpful because we would have found it much quicker. But anyway, so the way that I provide information to my dogs is really, really different. And what I've learned is that so many border collie owners are not communicating exactly what it is that they want. And what I've realized is that actually is extremely frustrating to border collies. And I think it's frustrating to any dog, don't get me wrong, it's not just border collies. But when you consider that border collies were bred to serve, essentially, their role as they see it in life is to support the farmer in rounding up these pesky sheep. That bond that they have with their person, not only is it frustrating not to understand what it is that you want, but it's also potentially, and I think about this a lot, I thought about this at agility recently, that it can hurt their feelings if you ask them to do something that you know that they can't do. So the reason it came up in recently was with Summer. There was we were in agility class, and there was a weave. It wasn't an entry, it was the exit I knew that she would struggle with. And she had struggled the previous week with easier weaves. And I was like, do you know what? I need to break this down for you. I need to make this bit easier. And I said to the instructor, I said, we're going to skip the weaves for this evening. And she said, oh, no, we can. And I said, no, like, what I knew was that if I asked her to do it and I knew really that she couldn't do it, I was going to hurt her feelings. And why would I want to do that? Like, if I know that she needs it broken down for her, which then I went and did, and she struggled a little bit to start with the breakdown, but worked through it, and then it was lovely. I want to be that person. I want to be the person that breaks it down for her, helps her understand it, and helps her achieve what it is that I'm asking her to do. Because when I'm that person, I'm also then a person that she will turn to when she's in a sticky spot, that when she gets stuck, except when she's under the shed, as it turns out. But now I see something quite different to what I did in my early 20s, that dogs don't always bark because they're bad dogs. They bark because they're confused, or they're overwhelmed by something, or they haven't been heard soon enough. Okay, that's really important. So lots of times people are like, they don't give any warning and they just start barking. And sometimes they get to that point because their earlier signals have been missed so many times that they're just like, it's a waste of time. Like, it's a waste of time saying that I'm not very sure about this. I'm just going to go into full-blown barking, because at least at that point, people pay attention and they move me away from the thing that is bothering me. So when I was reflecting on this episode to put this information together, I have to say I felt a bit sad and a bit guilty, a bit ashamed. Yeah, a bit ashamed. Because when I think back to how I used to be with my dogs, because I used to get shouty and I used to get cross, and I used to take out my frustration. I never beat them with heavy sticks or anything, but certainly I was not a nice person to be around when I was frustrated. I probably still am not at times, but hopefully I am more responsible about realizing when I might have contributed to the situation. But it's hard, actually, to talk about those early dogs who I just missed so much and I adored so much while they were here. And like I talk about, I'd love to do a do-over with them. And I think the only thing that maybe helps me forgive myself, I guess, is that whilst I'm not proud of being that person, I really like, there's a quote by Maya Angelou, which I think is, if I were brave enough to have a tattoo, I might have this tattooed on me, but I'm not brave enough. And she says something like, do the best you can. Do the best you can until you know better. And when you know better, do better. Something like that. I've probably misquoted horribly, but and so here's how I look at it. And here's how I have learned to forgive that younger version of myself. I didn't know what I didn't know. All right. I didn't know what I didn't know. And my commitment to change and to doing better is me honoring those past dogs. All right. Those dogs deserve better from me. That is the truth of it. But the best way that I can honor them now is by doing better for the dogs I have today. So for those dogs that are, waiting for me, in my living room when I go back in, doing better for them is how I honor the fact that I made mistakes in the past, but I'm making amends. And also, for the people I work with too. When I think back, I think probably I was not the most helpful teacher I could have been, because I didn't know what I didn't know. And I thought that absolutely I knew what I was talking about. But I think with some age, what you learn is that nobody knows everything, and anybody that says they do, run a mile. Because I think the thing that we should always be doing is learning, always learning. And like, as I say, listening to Bertie's chatter and understanding it so much more, but also having to learn him, like him as a person. So knowing my dogs as I do and knowing what their communications are, but doing, from the beginning, from Bertie, what it is, how is the world from his perspective? How's the world from his perspective, and understanding that to be able to support and help him grow into the best version of himself. And one of the things that I should say is I didn't come to this all by myself. So this ability to forgive myself and this ability to take what I was not proud of and turn it into something better was something I learned about from a lady called Dr. Catherine McAleese. And I came across her because I was a nervous competitor in the agility ring. This is where Ella got a lot of her barking from, actually, because she'd be very frustrated. I'd be running around the course and then suddenly I'd get to like obstacle 10 and I couldn't remember where I was going next. My mind would be a complete blank and I would just stop. I've got video actually of just stopping in the ring, and it felt like a couple of minutes. It wasn't a couple of minutes when I look back on the video. It felt like a really long time. And Ella stops and she barks at me. She doesn't carry on. She doesn't randomly take equipment, but she is like, for goodness sake, like we're running, and she's having a lovely time and I've stopped. It's weird. But in working on those agility nerves with Dr. Catherine, what I realized was, and I thought this mindset thing that I was going to her for was just for agility. But what I learned was that mindset is important for everything. So having the ability to shake off a bad day, a bad experience, to take some positives out of something which had maybe been a negative, that is not just valuable from an agility perspective, or a dog training or dog owning perspective, but it's important from a life perspective. And like I say, if we can turn something bad, if we take something bad and turn it around, like having had a bad walk with our dogs and, them kicking off at the neighbour's dog and there being a big Barney and da-da. Okay, if I can go from there to, okay, what can I learn from this? What can I learn from this so that this doesn't happen again, so I don't have to experience these feelings again? And also, what stuff actually went, like, what can I take as a positive from it? And sometimes it can be just as much as Dr. Cat comes and talks to my my Collie Culture Club student, and one of the things that she asked us to do is she asked us to come up with 3 positives. Okay, 3 positives after any particular experience. And one of the things she said that is perfectly acceptable to put is, we are still alive and breathing in and out. That just being alive and having survived it is enough of a positive. So sometimes we have to dig deep and we have to, really come up with very small things, if you like. Although I'm not sure breathing in, yeah, that's quite a big thing, I would say. But yeah, learning that was a real breakthrough, because otherwise I think what could have happened is that in learning more about dog training, but not learning more about mindset alongside it, I think I would have beaten myself up and not necessarily turned those negative feelings into something that now is quite positive, and helps other people, helps my own dogs going forward. And after I lost Kai, I was in deep grief after I lost Kai. He left me quite suddenly. We found a lump. He had lymphoma and found a big tennis ball sized lump on his neck. I think that might have been like the Wednesday or the Thursday night. And on the Monday morning, he was being put to sleep. He was so uncomfortable. It all happened very quickly, and it was horrible, is what it was. And the qualities about Kai, the reason that Kai was so important to me, particularly at that time, and he was important throughout his life, but my dad was very ill, and we were just over a year off losing my dad. We hadn't lost him, sorry, at that point, but he was poorly and he was coming towards the end, and we didn't know that, but he was coming towards the end as well. And those qualities that I loved in Kai were his strength, his loyalty, his steadfastness. And I started to see another counsellor, a psychotherapist called Claire. And Claire is still someone I talk to today. She's an amazing lady. And one of the things that she really helped me with was as much as Kai was all of those wonderful things, and he was just a brilliant dog who I miss to this day, what she said was that those qualities that I saw in him, one of the things that she asked me to be open to was it possible that those qualities that I loved in him were also qualities that I saw reflected in me? Were those things that I loved about him, were they also qualities that I actually had in me? So I had more strength. I had more ability to cope with the days that were to come without Kai. Oh, still makes me. And as it turns out, she was right. I mean, the truth for anybody, when you lose somebody, is that you don't have a choice in it, and grief is what it is. But you also know that when you've survived something like that, that you do draw upon wells of strength that you didn't realize that you had, and losing Kai was hard. Oh, it was really hard, because there were lots of things going on in my life at the time, as well as Dad coming to the end. But yes, Claire pointing that out was so helpful. And what I do now is when there is something about one of my dogs, so when Impact panics about something, she gets panicky about stuff, what I see in her actually is that sometimes I get panicky about stuff too. So hopefully, not always, but hopefully it gives me more empathy for their perspective. Because the thing is, I can't pick out all the good stuff about them and say, yep, I'm all of those good things, without also going and acknowledging that some of the stuff that they struggle with, I struggle with too. Maybe not the same things. Like, it doesn't make me panic if the Ring doorbell goes in quite the same way it does Impact, but I do get panicky about stuff, and managing that actually can be really difficult. So to have a higher expectation on someone that I love than I do on myself seems a bit unfair. So yeah, useful for empathy, definitely. Now, throughout kind of all of my learning about dog training and learning about mindset, what it has fostered is a growing belief that we need to change, not just thinking about training the dog. So we need to think less about just focusing on the dog's end of the lead, but also thinking about our end of the lead too, because it's not just the dog. If it were just the dog, I think actually life would be a lot easier. But the truth of our lives with dogs is that it's a relationship. So if something is broken in that, we both feel it. Like if the dog is struggling, it's causing a havoc with us. If we are struggling, it often affects our dogs. So it's not as simple as saying, I need to fix the dog. The dog isn't broken any more than you're broken. It's often that we just need to understand something a bit more, and we need to go into something in a bit more depth. And one of the things that I think I realized recently, when we went to pick Bertie up, I went with my mum to, it's been absolutely wonderful to go and support my mum doing this, to see how happy little Bertie makes her, and getting to know a new dog. I mean, who doesn't love meeting a puppy and getting to know a new dog? But one of the things that I've loved about having Bertie be here is when he climbed into my lap and told me that I was one of his safe spaces. That's just a huge privilege, which, I mean, I've always loved when puppies have climbed into my lap and said, let me tell you about my day. That's always been lovely. But to be a little dog's safe space is a privilege and something that I don't take lightly. And over the years, one of the things that's been interesting that when I've worked with dogs in classes and workshops and things, is I see sometimes in dogs that they come to me and it's like there's it sounds a bit hippie this, but I'm going to go with it anyway. But they give me that look They give me that look where I've gone and explained something to their person, or I've done something with them to explain, to their person how I want them to do something. And the dog gives me a look and they're like, you get me. Thank you. And as I say, I know it's a little bit hippie-ish and there will be more scientific dog trainers than me probably going, oh, she's off on one. But I believe that our dogs are able to communicate with us in different ways. And I think that they can experience gratitude and be grateful for being seen, because who doesn't like being seen? When you think of that person that makes you feel safest in the world, it's probably because they get you, because they can see the world from your point of view. And I feel really lucky that because of the number of dogs that I've worked with, both in person and actually online, and being able to give feedback online, the ability to share that with someone so that their dog experiences a better quality of life because they're understood, huge. I think that's really, really important. And like I say, I think when you compare it to like a human connection with another person, you can absolutely understand how it feels to be seen. And that more or less has just absolutely turned everything that my 20 something self believed in barking. Really, it's just turned it up on its head. Because when your dog knows they've been understood, everything shifts. It's like the air clears for them. And actually, we start to see quite big progress when we get to that point, when the dog goes, oh, okay. All right, you got it now. You understand. Yeah, we can have some really big breakthroughs as a result of that. So barking with my dogs now feels much more like a conversation rather than a battle. So if my dogs do bark, Vodka I can think of just when I take her out for a walk at the end of the day, that she'll give me a, what? Would you hurry up? And I know exactly what she's saying to me. And I'm like, hang on, lady, hang on. It's that kind of a conversation. And oh my, Vodka used to shout at me during training if I'd made a mistake. But she's shouting and it's playful. Like it's a conversation between friends, we're okay. And the difference between Ella barking in frustration at me is very different to Vodka's shout now. So sometimes Vodka will shout at me because she's like, this is hard, this is difficult. And I'm like, I know, and I think you could do it. And then she works it through, because I don't tend to set stuff that's impossible for her at all. I know her quite well. But Ella, there were times where she was probably sometimes clueless, because she was like, oh, for crying out loud, you've given me this enormous puzzle to solve and you haven't given me all the pieces, to do it. So the difference in the barking is really different, because with Vodka, it tends to be a single bark or a couple of barks, whereas sometimes Ella's would be multiple barks, because she'd just be so fed up. God love her. It wasn't like that at the end, I'm pleased to report. And by the end, when we were doing any size classes, which is where you have the jumps quite low and the judge will set a very open flowing course, it's lovely. And older dogs, retired dogs, get to go and compete in those. That was just some of the most fun we'd ever had. And we had gone and done some really cool stuff during Ella's career. But yeah, those times at the end, I think some of those might have been the most precious memories. Which is which says everything, doesn't it? But the joy of helping Vodka push through a hard task and giving her that feeling of pride in herself, of achievement, of having overcome something. Honestly, it's like banter between friends now, because there's trust, there's understanding, and she has permission to express herself too. That's important. There's room for dissent. She's allowed to say how she feels about things without, me giving her a hard time. So what would you say to the version of you who felt helpless and frustrated? I'm interested. What would you say to yourself? And here's the thing I would like to hear you respond. And if you can't respond this for yourself, then please let me do so for you. You're better than you think you are. It's really important that you understand that, because even if you're listening to this podcast now, what I know to be true is that you are trying to find more information to be able to help you and your dog get more on the same page. So you are better than you think you are. Whatever version of, a gremlin in your head is telling you that you can't do it or you're not good enough, or you don't know it all, and that's okay. That's something that we all have to make peace with. We don't know it all, and we've got to be okay with that. And the discomfort of not knowing is part of the growth and is part of the journey with our dogs that we go on. And different dogs will teach us different things. And everyone hears those gremlin voices in their heads. And they're liars. They're liars. You know, if they're telling you can't do this, then tell them to sit down and shush, because absolutely you can do this. It's just a question of finding the right information to be able to support you. One thing that Dr. Catherine used to say, and Dr. Brené Brown, who I follow on via her social media things, is they would say something like, you wouldn't speak to a friend like that, so why talk to yourself that way? And I think that's important. I think that's very true, that sometimes the horrible voice, the mean voice in our head is saying things that we wouldn't dream of saying to another person. So let's not talk to ourselves that way if we can help it. Or at least, like, if we hear them talking, tell them to go and sit down. Now, one thing, because I'm as well as a dog lover, I'm also a lover of gardens. I have a metaphor that I'm going to leave you with. And it's about plants and growing plants and things. Now, people often come to me about specific problems. So they've got reactivity issues, chasing issues, recall, barking, whatever. And they are focused on whatever that thing is. But what's interesting is, more often than not, they don't come to me specifically about just barking. They'll come to me about the other stuff. But barking is often the first sign that communication is broken down. Because if you're getting a lot of barking in your life with your dog, that tells me that communication is not at its optimum at this point. So it's not about fixing a behavior for me. It's about looking underneath to see what's going on. And the plant metaphor is that the behavior that is being frustrating and annoying is the bit that you can see, maybe the growth above the ground, maybe the flower that has come out. But one of the things that you would do if you were a gardener and you saw that a plant wasn't thriving and you had a particular issue is you dig into the soil. You'd look to see, did the plant have enough water, too much water, the sunlight, everything that makes that plant grow. You'd look at all of that. And that's what I look to do when I start working with dogs. I have to look at the whole picture, because if I just look at that one little piece that you maybe bring to me, then I wouldn't be doing you or that dog a service, because actually you are in relationship, and there are many things that are going into that dog's behavior. And so we need to look under every stone. We need to look at everything and see, what's going on. And if barking is a part of your world right now, take it as information. Don't shut it down, but get curious. That would be my advice to you. Look beneath the ground. Let's see what's growing around it and figure out what's going on. And if you're not sure what's missing, then I'm here, and I'd love to help if you'd like me to. And that's a wrap for today. Thanks for tuning in. I hope this episode gave you the insight and motivation to make real progress with your collie. A big shout out to today's sponsor, Collie Culture Club, my online training membership designed to give you the personalised support you need. Inside the club, you'll get my expert feedback on your training, weekly live sessions with me and guest experts, and a supportive community to help you every step of the way. Don't forget, you can find all the details about the club, plus the resources mentioned in today's episode inside our Facebook group. So be sure to check it out. Want to chat about this episode, ask follow-up questions, or share your oh no, not again moments? Come tell us in the free Facebook group. I'd love to hear from you. And until next time, keep focusing on progress, not perfection, because every small win counts.